USS Yankee was originally El Norte, a steamer built in 1892 at Newport News, Virginia, by the Newport News Shipbuilding and Drydock Co. for the Southern Pacific Railroad's Morgan Line. The ship was acquired by the United States Navy from the Southern Pacific Company on 6 April 1898. The ship was renamed and commissioned at New York on 14 April 1898. Commander Willard H. Brownson in command. Career: Spanish-American War. After fitting out as an auxiliary cruiser, the ship joined in the Spanish-American War and patrolled the coastal waters between Block Island and Cape Henlopen until the 27th of May. That day, Yankee stopped at Tompkinsville, New York to coal ship. On the 29th of May, she returned to sea in shape to southerly course to join the fleet off Cuba. En route, she touched briefly at St. Nicholas, Haiti, on the evening of the 2nd of June and then continued on toward Cuba. Early the following morning, Yankee joined the blockade off Santiago de Cuba and conducted patrols for the next 5 days. Battle of Guantanamo Bay. On the morning of the 6th of June, she dueled shore batteries briefly and near Santiago, and on the 7th of June, joined Marblehead St. Louis for a cable-cutting incursion into Guantanamo Bay. While St. Louis dragged for and cut the 3 cables, Yankee and Marblehead covered her activities by engaging the Spanish gunboats Alvarado and Sandoval. After putting the Spanish gunboats to flight, the 2 American warships turned their attention toward the fort at Caymanara, which had been making a nuisance of itself with its single, large-caliber gun, a venerable, smooth-bore muzzleloader. As Yankee and Marblehead silenced the last adversary, St. Louis completed her cable-cutting mission, and the 3 ships exited the bay. Yankee then briefly resumed blockade duty off Santiago, but on the 8th of June got underway for St. Nicholas with dispatches. On the 9th of June, just before she arrived at her destination, the auxiliary cruiser stopped 2 merchantmen and inspected them. They turned out to be the Norwegian SS Norse and the British SS Ely, so Yankee allowed them to proceed on the way. She completed her mission at Haiti and returned to Santiago early the following morning. At about noon on the 10th of June, Yankee set a course for Port Antonio, Jamaica, to deliver dispatches and to search from the suspected blockade runner SS Purísima Concepción. After delivering the dispatches at Port Antonio on the 10th of June, and visiting Montego Bay in search of Purísima Concepción, the warship returned to the Santiago area on the 12th of June. However, that same day, she received orders to move again, this time to Cienfuegos, about halfway up the southern coast of Cuba from Santiago, to stand guard there against Purísima Concepción's expected run. Action off Cienfuegos. The auxiliary cruiser arrived off Cienfuegos on the 13th of June and began patrolling the approaches to the harbor. At about 13:15 that afternoon, she spied a steamer standing out of the port toward her. Identifying the stranger as the Spanish gunboat Diego Velázquez, Yankee cleared for action and closed the enemy. At about 1,500 yards range, the American ship put her helm over, unmasked her port battery, and opened fire. The Spanish gunboat, markedly inferior to Yankee in armament, opted for a running fight in which she presented the smallest possible target and in which Yankee could bring only 1 or 2 of her guns to bear, without turning away from her target's course. Consequently, Diego Velázquez came about and headed back toward Cienfuegos, firing as she went. Yankee followed, shooting her port forecastle gun constantly and periodically turning to starboard to unmask her entire port battery. Ultimately, Diego Velázquez reached safety under the protection of Sabanilla Battery, and the gunboat Lince came out to join her in the fray. Yankee continued to fire her port battery as she passed the two gunboats and shore battery abeam at about 4,000 yards range. She completed one pass and then put the helm to port and came about for another pass, this time bringing her starboard battery into action for the first time. During Yankee's second pass, Diego Velázquez and Lince abandoned the fight and sought refuge in Cienfuegos harbor. Yankee continued firing on Sabanilla Battery until 1500 and then withdrew to her blockade station off the harbor. Yankee remained off Cienfuegos for 2 days. On the 14th of June, there was a brief moment of anxiety when a large man-of-war started out of the harbor. Yankee cleared for action and stood in toward the warship, but all hands breathed a sigh of relief when the newcomer was identified as the neutral German SMS Skya. The following afternoon, the auxiliary cruiser gave up her vigil for Purísima Concepción off Cienfuegos and set a course back to the eastern end of Cuba. She rejoined the Santiago blockade on the 16th of June but put into the anchorage at Guantanamo Bay the following day to take on coal. Late on the 18th of June, the ship returned to sea bound once more for blockade duty off Cienfuegos. On the 19th of June, during the passage from Guantanamo Bay to Cienfuegos, Yankee stopped and inspected two sailing vessels, a British schooner and a Norwegian bark, and a steamer, the British SS Adula. All three had the papers in order, and the auxiliary cruiser allowed them to proceed unmolested. That evening, she arrived off Cienfuegos and began cruising on blockade station between the port and Casilda. Action off Casilda. At about 8:30 on the morning of the 20th of June, Yankee sighted a steamer lying in Casilda harbor closely fitting the description of Purísima Concepción. The American ship stood in as close to the shoals as she dared and then fired a shot across the steamer's bow in an unsuccessful effort to make her show her colors. Instead, the merchantman began preparations for getting underway. Yankee responded by opening a steady fire at extreme range. As the supposed Spanish steamer moved farther into shell water and disappeared behind some islets, Yankee shifted fire to an enemy gunboat and a floating battery, both of which had opened an ineffective fire upon her. The extreme range, in excess of 5,000 yards, made the gunfire from both sides so ineffective that Yankee broke off the engagement and resumed her patrols between Casilda and Cienfuegos. The auxiliary cruiser continued her blockade of that stretch of the Cuban coast until the 24th of June, when her dwindling supply of coal forced her to head for Key West. En route to that base, she visited the Isle of Pines, where she captured and destroyed 5 Spanish fishing vessels on the 25th of June. Blockade of Cuba. Yankee arrived in Key West on the 27th of June and began taking on coal. She completed her refueling operation and departed Key West on the 3rd of July, bound for New York, where she arrived 2 days later. She remained at New York until the 12th of July, taking on ammunition for transportation to the Eastern Squadron on the Cuban blockade. On the 13th of July, she reached Norfolk, where she spent another 4 days taking on additional ammunition for the ships of the blockading squadron. Yankee left Hampton Roads on the 17th of July and arrived in Guantanamo Bay 4 days later. Thereat she began the tedious but dangerous job of transferring her cargo of ammunition to the various warships in the anchorage. The ship remained at Guantanamo Bay until the 11th of August, when she resumed blockade duty. patrolling initially in search of the armed merchant ship Montserrat. 3 days later, while she cruised the northern coast of Cuba, Yankee received word of the cessation of hostilities in response to Spain's suit for peace. She re-entered Guantanamo Bay on the afternoon of the 15th of August and remained there until the 24th of August when she headed home. Training ship Yankee stopped briefly at Tompkinsville at the end of August and then made a round-trip voyage to League Island, and back to Tompkinsville at the beginning of September. She returned to League Island on the 19th of September. There, a crew of New York Naval Militia reservists left the ship to return home via train for mustering out, though she remained in commission technically until decommissioned on the 16th of March 1899. Yankee spent the interim at League Island. That location also remained her home for the more than 3 years she spent in reserve. Her inactivity ended when she was placed back in commission on the 1st of May 1903, Commander G.P. Co.for Cressy in command. Following recommissioning, Yankee served along the east coast between Chesapeake Bay and the Maine coast, training landsmen in the ways of the sea. Early in December 1903, she headed south for winter maneuvers and gunnery drills with the North Atlantic Fleet in the Gulf and the Caribbean around Hispaniola. Yankee served at Santo Domingo to help restore order and to straighten out the country's financial muddle. On the 1st of February, the ship was fired upon by rebel troops. In response, the United States sent the protected cruisers USS Columbia and USS Newark. In the Santo Domingo affair, the two ships bombarded the city and sent a landing party ashore on the 11th of February. After visiting a number of West Indian ports in conjunction with the exercises, she returned north late in March 1904, and on the 6th of April, was moored to appear at League Island where she remained until October. On the 16th of October, she got underway for Newport News to embark 400 landsmen there before resuming her training schedule. In December, Yankee made a round-trip voyage to Panama to exchange Marine garrisons in the Canal Zone. She disembarked some of the returning Marines at Hampton Roads on the 31st of December 1904 and on New Year's Day 1905 pushed on toward Tompkinsville to deliver the remainder. After a returned voyage to Newport News, she headed for League Island where she entered the Navy Yard for repairs on the 13th of January. Occupation of the Dominican Republic. The ship completed those repairs on the 9th of March and loaded men, stores, and ammunition at Tompkinsville from the 10th of March to the 12th of March before getting underway for the West Indies. For the next 17 months, the island of Hispaniola, Cuba's neighbor to the east, became her center of operations. Successive coups since assassination of the dictator Huro in 1899 had added civil strife and anarchy to the list of woes of a country already racked by desperate financial problems. Yankee spent most of her time in Dominican waters and ports, departing infrequently for replenishment stops at such American bases as Key West and Guantanamo Bay, and made one voyage back to New York in July 1905 for repairs at the New York Navy Yard. The ship, by then classified as a transport, left Santo Domingo on the 21st of August 1906 and after participating in the Presidential Naval Review held at Oyster Bay from the 2nd of September to the 4th of September. She unloaded stores at New York in preparation for inactivation. On the 25th of September, Yankee was again placed out of commission at Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Sometime during the next 2 years, she was moved to the Boston Navy Yard. For it was at that location that she was once again commissioned on 15 June 1908. Commander Charles C. Marsh in command. Sinking after shakedown early in July, the ship resumed its familiar duty training, with Naval Militia reservists and Naval Academy midshipmen embarked. She spent the summer of 1908 cruising the Atlantic coast between Boston and Chesapeake Bay. On the 23rd of September 1908, during one such training exercise, Yankee ran aground on Spindle Rock near Hen and Chicken's Lightship. She remained there until refloated on the 4th of December. Her reprieve, however, was short-lived. While being towed to New Bedford, she sank in Buzzards Bay. Yankee's name was finally struck from the Naval Vessel Register on 17 April 1912.